Welcome to this channel. At the sum of 1,000 subscribers, I will post a series of special stories for you. Subscribe. The Earth was a shadow of its former self. Decades of relentless war over dwindling resources had left the planet scarred. Megacities lay in ruins, seas turned into wastelands, and the once thriving ecosystems had crumbled into barren deserts. Humanity clung to life, scattered across small, fortified colonies on the Moon, Mars, and the asteroid belt, each barely sustaining itself. The stars had once been the dream of explorers, but now they were the only hope for survival. Captain Evan Thorne sat in the dimly lit control room of the Vanguard outpost, watching the feed of Earth from orbit, his thoughts heavy with memories of a home long lost. He had fought in the resource wars, seen friends and family perish, and now all that was left was the mission. Not to rebuild, but to survive. Captain Thorne, incoming transmission from Earth Command, the voice of the outpost's AI chimed in, cutting through the silence. Evan rubbed his eyes and turned toward the glowing screen in front of him. "Put it through," he said, straightening in his seat. The screen flickered, revealing the weary face of General Aria Miles, the head of Earth Command. Her gray hair was tied back tightly, and deep lines creased her brow, a testament to years of stress and too little rest. Her eyes, however, were sharp, focused, carrying the same urgency that had become second nature in this era. "Captain Thorne, we have a situation," she began, skipping the pleasantries. "It's about the Phyrexians. We received a diplomatic signal earlier today. They want to initiate contact, formalize an alliance, and they're making an offer." Evan leaned forward, a mix of intrigue and caution rising in his chest. The Phyrexians. For years, their ships had skirted the edge of human space, appearing and disappearing without warning. No one knew much about them, except that they were powerful, highly advanced, and far taller than any human. Rumors of their size and strength circulated through the colonies like whispers in the dark, and every encounter left humans feeling dwarfed in more ways than one. "What's the offer?" Evan asked, already suspecting that the answer wasn't going to be simple. "They're offering us a lifeline," General Miles said, her voice lowering. "Their homeworld, Dalchuan, is rich in resources we need: oxygen-rich forests, vast oceans teeming with life. It's a perfect complement to our needs. They're willing to share their technology, bioengineering capabilities, and even terraform some of our colonies." Evan's stomach nodded. "What's the catch?" The general's silence stretched for a moment before she answered. "They need genetic material. Specifically, they need human males." Evan blinked, unsure if he had heard her right. "Males? For what?" "Reproduction," she said bluntly, though there was a slight hesitation in her voice. "The Phyrexians are biologically at an impasse. They can no longer reproduce on their own. Their species is stagnating. But our genetic structure is compatible with theirs, at least, their scientists believe so. They want volunteers." Evan stood from his chair, his mind reeling. This was beyond anything he had expected. Diplomatic missions, resource negotiations, sure. But this? A trade deal that involved mating with an alien species? "Are you telling me they want us to breed with them?" he asked, incredulity slipping into his voice. General Miles let out a weary sigh. "It's more than that. They're offering full citizenship for anyone who participates. Technology, resources, food, water, the entire Earth Coalition will benefit from this alliance. But yes, it involves an intimate connection." Evan stared at the screen, trying to wrap his mind around the enormity of it all. The Phyrexians were not just asking for cooperation, they were asking for a literal merging of species. The future of humanity, the survival of his people, might depend on whether anyone would dare to take this step. And from the way the general was looking at him, it was clear they had someone in mind. "You want me to volunteer," Evan said, his voice heavy. "You're one of our best, Captain. You've led missions into hostile territory, survived against impossible odds. You've seen what the wars have done to Earth. You know better than anyone what we stand to lose if we say no." She paused, her voice softening. "I wouldn't ask this of you if there was any other way." Evan clenched his fists at his sides, his mind racing. He had seen Earth dying, seen it fall apart. The colonies were barely hanging on. But to throw himself into something so unknown, so intimate, it was more than just a mission. It was a personal sacrifice. "Why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because you've already given everything else," General Miles said, her voice soft but firm. "And because you're one of the few men left with the strength to see this through." Evan closed his eyes for a moment, his thoughts drifting to his family, his wife and son, lost during the final days of the war. There was nothing left for him on Earth, nothing left to lose. He had been fighting for a future that seemed impossible, but this was a chance, however strange, to secure something for humanity's survival. For the first time in years, the idea of a future felt tangible, even if it was tied to a Phyrexian alliance. "I'll do it," he said, opening his eyes and meeting the general's gaze. "I'll be the volunteer." General Miles nodded, relief washing over her face. "Thank you, Captain. The Phyrexian envoy will arrive in 2 days. They'll take you aboard their ship for the youth process. The details will be explained when you meet their emissary." As the transmission ended, Evan sat back down in his chair, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the familiar constellations, an alien woman was waiting. Not just any woman, a towering, 8-foot-tall emissary from a species whose very survival depended on what he was about to do. And for the first time in a long time, Evan Thorne felt something stir inside him, fear, excitement, and the weight of a choice that could change everything. The clock was ticking. The vigilant star was unlike anything Captain Evan Thorne had ever seen. As the Earth shuttle approached the Phyrexian vessel, he marveled at its sheer size. It wasn't just large, it was massive, spanning several miles across and radiating an eerie, pale blue glow. Its surface seemed alive, shifting and undulating like the skin of some colossal, living organism. Organic-looking tendrils extended from the hull, pulsating with light, as if the ship were breathing. Evan's heart pounded in his chest as they neared the docking port. He had been briefed on the Phyrexians and their technology, but seeing it up close was something else entirely. The Phyrexians didn't just build their ships, they grew them. Every inch of the vessel was made from bioengineered materials, living tissue seamlessly fused with advanced machinery. It was a ship that was as much a living entity as it was a technological marvel. "This is Captain Thorne, preparing for docking," he said into his comm, his voice steady despite the rising tension in his gut. The human pilot nodded, steering the shuttle with precision. "Docking in progress, Captain. You'll be in Phyrexian space in 5 minutes." Evan adjusted the collar of his uniform, trying to shake the surreal feeling that had settled over him. He wasn't just entering an alien ship, he was stepping into an entirely different world, one that would soon ask more of him than any mission he'd ever undertaken. He'd faced enemies, fought in brutal battles, and survived the impossible, but this was something entirely new. The docking procedure completed with a subtle hiss as the shuttle's hatch aligned with the entrance to the Phyrexian ship. The doors slid open with a smooth, almost silent motion, revealing a long, dimly lit corridor ahead. The air that flowed in had a distinct scent, something like fresh rain mixed with an underlying hint of metallic tang. It was alien, unfamiliar, yet strangely inviting. "Good luck, Captain," the pilot said, his voice carrying a note of respect. "We'll be waiting for your signal." Evan nodded once, then stepped through the airlock and into the Phyrexian vessel. The moment he crossed the threshold, he felt a slight tingling sensation pass over his skin, like the ship itself was scanning him, analyzing his presence. He had been told the Phyrexians used a blend of biotechnology and telepathy to communicate with their ships, and now he was experiencing it firsthand. The corridor stretched before him, bathed in soft, bluish light that seemed to pulse with life. The walls had a strange texture, not quite metallic, not quite organic, but something in between. He walked cautiously, his boots echoing softly on the smooth floor as he moved deeper into the vessel. Each step felt heavier than the last, the gravity subtly different from what he was used to. Ahead, a door slid open, and Evan's breath caught in his throat as he saw her for the first time. Katera, the Phyrexian emissary, stood at the far end of the room. Even from a distance, she was striking tall, even more imposing than he had imagined. She towered over him, at least 8 feet in height, her form both powerful and graceful. Her skin shimmered in the low light, a metallic silver that seemed to ripple with each movement, reflecting the soft glow of the ship around her. She wore a robe of intricately woven biofiber, its texture shifting subtly, as if alive with its own energy. Her figure was lithe, elegant, yet there was an undeniable strength in her posture. But it was her eyes that truly captured him, deep, radiant blue, glowing faintly in the dim light. They were sharp, intelligent, but also held an intensity that unnerved him. She watched him with a mix of curiosity and something else. Expectation? Amusement? Captain Evan Thorne, Katera's voice echoed in the room, though her lips barely moved. It was not just a sound, it was a vibration in the air, a low hum that seemed to resonate within him. She spoke in perfect English, but her voice carried an otherworldly quality, as if it were layered with unspoken thoughts. "You have arrived." Evan swallowed, keeping his nerves in check as he stepped forward. "I have. It's an honor to meet you, Katera." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes flickering over him, not with judgment, but with a kind of analytical curiosity, as if he were something new and unfamiliar, an anomaly. "You are smaller than I expected," she said, her head tilting slightly. Her expression was not unkind, but factual, as though she were making an observation about an object of study. Evan almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but he kept his composure. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Katera's lips curled into the faintest semblance of a smile, but there was something deeper in her expression, a strange warmth mixed with clinical detachment. She stepped closer, moving with a fluid grace that seemed almost unnatural for someone of her size. As she approached, Evan had to crane his neck just to meet her gaze. "You are the first human to accept this task," she said, her voice lowering. "The others were unwilling." Evan felt a chill creep down his spine. "I understand the stakes," he replied. "Earth needs this alliance. I'm here to make sure it happens." Katera nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You are brave, Captain Thorne. Your people have suffered greatly. We have observed your wars, your struggles for survival. It is admirable that, even in your darkest moments, you fight for your future." Evan felt the weight of her words sink in. The Phyrexians had been watching them. Not just from the sidelines, but closely. The thought was both unsettling and intriguing. He wondered how much they truly knew about humanity about him. She reached out then, her long, slender fingers hovering just inches from his face. Evan froze, unsure of what was about to happen, but something inside him told him to stay still. Her hand moved slowly, almost reverently, as if she were studying every detail of him. When her fingertips brushed against his forehead, he felt a sudden rush of warmth, a tingling sensation that spread through his body. And then, without warning, his mind was flooded with her thoughts. Images flashed before his eyes: Katera's world, vast and beautiful, filled with towering trees that shimmered with life, oceans teeming with strange creatures, and a sky unlike anything he had ever seen. He saw the Phyrexians, their society built on a delicate balance of technology and nature, their towering cities made of living, breathing structures. But beneath the beauty, he felt the weight of their desperation, their need for survival, for something that had been lost. "You see now, don't you?" Katera's voice was in his mind, blending with his own thoughts. "We are not so different, you and I. We seek the same thing, a future for our people." Evan staggered back, the connection severing abruptly as Katera withdrew her hand. His heart raced, his breath quickened, but he felt Something new. An understanding, perhaps. He had seen into her mind, her world, and felt the gravity of what was at stake. I see it, he whispered, still trying to process what had just happened. You're dying. Your species. You can't reproduce anymore. Katera nodded slowly, her gaze softening. We are on the brink of extinction. Without your help, without this union, we will cease to exist. Evan steadied himself, trying to regain control of his racing thoughts. He had known the Phyrexians needed humanity for their survival, but he hadn't understood the depth of it until now. This wasn't just a mission, it was a lifeline for an entire species. Katera stepped closer again, her eyes never leaving his. The process is not just physical, Captain Thorne. It is a merging of minds, of thoughts, of experiences. Our union will bind us in ways that go beyond biology. It will create a new future for both our people. Evan met her gaze, the enormity of the situation sinking in. This was more than a diplomatic mission, more than an act of survival. This was about forging a connection that transcended species, a bond that could reshape the future of both Earth and the Phyrexians. And it was a bond that would begin with him. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Katera's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. Then let us begin. The heart of the Vigilant Star was alive. As Captain Evan Thorne followed Katera deeper into the Phyrexian ship, he could feel the pulsing energy beneath his feet, the rhythmic hum of the vessel's systems vibrating through the walls. The corridors twisted and curved in strange, organic patterns, lined with bioluminescent plants that cast an eerie, otherworldly glow. It was like walking through the veins of some colossal, living creature. Every step felt as if he was being drawn into the core of something ancient and powerful. He glanced at Katera, her towering form gliding effortlessly ahead of him. Despite her size, she moved with the grace of a predator, each step deliberate, calculated. Her silver skin shimmered in the low light, catching his eye whenever she turned to check on him. She exuded an aura of calm confidence, but Evan could sense a deeper tension beneath her composed exterior. The weight of her people's survival was on her shoulders, and it was now intertwined with his own fate. Where are we going? Evan asked, trying to suppress the growing knot of apprehension in his chest. Katera didn't turn, but her voice filled the corridor, rich and deep, like the resonant hum of the ship itself. We are heading to the Chamber of Genesis. It is where the ritual will take place. Evan's pulse quickened. He had been briefed about the Phyrexians' reproductive process, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. The enormity of what was about to happen hung over him like a storm cloud. He had fought in wars, faced death more times than he could count, but now he was about to become part of something far more profound and far more personal than any battle he had ever fought. As they walked, Katera continued to speak, her tone both instructive and reassuring. Our ritual is more than a biological act, Captain Thorne. It is the merging of two beings on a fundamental level. Our technology will guide the process, but it is our minds, our thoughts, that will truly create the bond. You must be open to it, or the ritual will fail. Evan nodded, trying to process her words. And what happens if it fails? Katera slowed her pace slightly, her eyes glancing back at him. Failure is rare. But it would mean that the union could not be completed, and our alliance would be jeopardized. Your people, your world, would lose the chance for the resources we offer. Evan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The stakes were even higher than he'd thought. This wasn't just about two species coming together, it was about the survival of both. If he failed, humanity's chance at salvation would slip away, along with any hope for Earth's recovery. And for Katera, failure meant the slow extinction of her species. They arrived at the entrance to the Chamber of Genesis. The doors before them were unlike anything Evan had seen on the ship, so far ornate and intricate, with patterns that seemed to shift and move as he watched. Symbols that pulsed with energy danced across the surface, ancient Phyrexian glyphs that glowed faintly in the dim light. Katera placed her hand on the door, and a wave of energy passed through the structure. Slowly, the doors slid open with a low, melodic hum, revealing the chamber beyond. Evan's breath caught in his throat. The chamber of Genesis was unlike anything he had imagined. The room was vast, the ceiling arcing high above like the dome of a cathedral. In the center, a large platform rose from the floor, surrounded by thick, coiling vines that pulsed with life. The walls were lined with bioluminescent flora, casting soft shades of blue and green across the space. In the air, tiny motes of light floated like stars, drifting lazily through the chamber. But what truly captured his attention was the energy that filled the room. It was palpable, humming in the air, making his skin tingle with anticipation. The chamber itself seemed to be alive, responding to their presence, as if it knew what was about to happen. "This is the heart of the vigilant star," Katera said, her voice softer now. "The chamber is attuned to us. It will facilitate the connection between our bodies, our minds, and the ship itself. It is here that the bond will be forged." Evan stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. The platform in the center drew him in, its surface shimmering with a strange, fluid-like energy. It looked almost liquid, as if it would mold itself around anything that touched it. He felt a tug, an instinctual pull toward it, as though the room itself was urging him to take the next step. Katera moved to the center of the platform, her silver robes flowing around her like water. She turned to face him, her eyes glowing with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. "Are you ready, Captain Thorne?" she asked, her voice reverberating through the chamber. "This is the moment of truth." Evan swallowed hard, his pulse thundering in his ears. He could feel the weight of her gaze, the pressure of the mission, and the tension of the unknown. But deep down, he knew there was no turning back. He had come this far, and now the fate of two species rested on his shoulders. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Katera gave a small nod, her expression unreadable. She raised her arms, and the platform beneath her responded, the liquid-like surface rippling and shifting. Slowly, she extended her hand toward him, her long fingers beckoning him forward. Evan took a deep breath and stepped onto the platform. The moment his foot touched the surface, a wave of warmth surged through him. The platform wasn't cold and hard as he had expected, it was soft, almost pliable, like stepping into a pool of warm water. The sensation spread up his legs, wrapping around him like a gentle embrace. Katera's hand was still extended toward him, waiting. Without hesitation, Evan reached out and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, the chamber came alive. Light exploded around them, swirling in brilliant colors as the energy of the ship merged with their bodies. Evan felt a surge of power flow through him, a rush of emotions, thoughts, and sensations that left him breathless. It was as if the very essence of the ship was coursing through his veins, connecting him to Katera in a way that went beyond the physical. He felt her mind brushing against his, tentative at first, but then stronger, more insistent. Her thoughts flowed into his, a cascade of memories, experiences, and emotions that overwhelmed him. He saw her world Dialcho in its lush forests, teeming oceans, and radiant skies. He felt her pain, her longing for survival, her desire to save her people. But there was something more. Beneath the surface of her thoughts, Evan sensed a deeper need for connection, for companionship. Katera wasn't just seeking a genetic solution for her species. She was searching for something far more intimate, something that went beyond biology. "Let go of your fear," Katera's voice echoed in his mind, soothing and gentle. "Open your thoughts to me. Trust the process." Evan closed his eyes, surrendering to the connection. He let his mind open, allowing her to see his thoughts, his memories, his pain. He showed her the wars he had fought, the losses he had suffered, the deep loneliness that had haunted him since the death of his family. He revealed the weight of his mission, the responsibility he carried for the future of humanity. Katera's presence in his mind grew stronger, more comforting. She didn't just see his pain, she understood it. She had experienced her own losses, her own battles. In that moment, they weren't just two strangers bound by a mission. They were kindred spirits, connected by shared experiences, by the weight of their respective species' survival. The bond between them solidified, becoming something more than just a biological connection. It was an emotional and intellectual merging, a true union of their minds. Evan could feel her thoughts intertwining with his, her emotions blending with his own. It was overwhelming, but also exhilarating, a feeling of completeness he hadn't known he was missing. The platform beneath them glowed brighter, the energy intensifying as their connection deepened. Evan felt a pulse of warmth spread through his body, his heart pounding in sync with the rhythm of the chamber. The merging was nearly complete. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the energy around them faded, the light dimming to a soft glow. Evan opened his eyes to find Katera standing before him, her hand still in his. But something had changed. He could truly feel her inside his mind, her presence lingering like a gentle hum at the edge of his thoughts. The bond was there, woven between them like an invisible thread, connecting them in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. "It is done," Katera said softly, her voice filled with quiet reverence. Evan exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling over him. The ritual had been completed. The union was successful. And now, there was no turning back. He and Katera were bound, two beings from different worlds, connected by a bond that transcended biology. The fate of their people rested in their hands, but in that moment, Evan knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. When Captain Evan Thorne opened his eyes, the world felt different. The dim, bioluminescent glow of the Chamber of Genesis still bathed the room in its soft light, but everything seemed sharper now, more vivid. The air was filled with a faint hum, a resonance that he hadn't noticed before but now felt deeply in his bones, as if the very ship itself was alive and aware of his presence. He blinked, trying to clear the haze of emotions and sensations that still swirled through his mind. The connection with Katera lingered like a faint echo at the edges of his consciousness. He could feel her presence inside him, an almost tangible link that buzzed quietly in the back of his mind, not intrusive, but ever-present. It wasn't just her thoughts or her memories that lingered, it was a deeper understanding, an awareness of her emotions, her being. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. "You feel it, don't you?" Katera's voice, now familiar and soothing, drifted toward him. Her tone was softer, more intimate than before. Evan turned his head to find her standing nearby, watching him with a serene expression. She was still the imposing, graceful figure he had seen before, but now there was something more. The distance between them, once filled with uncertainty and wariness, had dissolved. He could sense the subtle shift in her, to a quiet vulnerability that hadn't been there before. "I do," Evan replied, his voice steady but filled with awe. "I didn't expect this. It's more than I thought it would be." Katera approached him, her footsteps silent on the living floor of the chamber. "The bond between us is not just physical. It is mental, emotional. We are connected now, Captain Thorne. Our thoughts will flow between us, our emotions will influence one another. The ship, too, is aware of this connection. It recognizes you now, as it recognizes me." Evan nodded slowly, still trying to grasp the enormity of what had just happened. His mind felt clearer, his senses heightened, as if the merging had awakened something dormant within him. He could feel the energy of the ship beneath his feet, the faint pulse of its systems vibrating in rhythm with his own heartbeat. He was part of something larger now, part of an intricate web that extended beyond his own understanding. "What does this mean for us?" Evan asked, looking into Katera's glowing blue eyes. "What happens now?" Katera's expression softened, and for the first time, Evan saw a flicker of something deeper in her gaze, something that resembled hope. "It means we are one now, Evan. Our people are bound through us. This union will pave the way for a new future, one where humans and Phyrexians are not just allies, but partners." You have given us what we need to survive, and in return, we will give your people the resources they need to rebuild. Evan felt a rush of emotion wash over him. The weight of the responsibility, the enormity of what they had accomplished, settled over him like a heavy cloak. He had done it. He had succeeded where no one else had dared to go. He had ensured the survival of two species, his own and the Phyrexians. But it was more than that. He had forged a bond that transcended politics, biology, and even the boundaries of space. But it wasn't just the future of Earth and Dalchuan that weighed on him, it was the personal connection he had forged with Katera. The bond they shared wasn't just diplomatic or strategic, it was something far more intimate. He could feel her emotions, her thoughts, blending with his own. And somewhere deep inside, he realized that he cared for her. In the short time they had spent together, something had shifted between them, something real. "What about us?" Evan asked quietly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "What happens to us?" Katera's gaze softened further, and for a brief moment, her towering, intimidating presence faded. She looked at him not as a Phyrexian emissary or a representative of her species, but as something more. As someone who had found a connection she hadn't expected. "I did not anticipate this," Katera admitted, her voice low, almost hesitant. "This bond between us was meant to be functional, a merging of our species to ensure survival. But—" She paused, her eyes flickering with something Evan had never seen in her before: vulnerability. "I did not expect to feel this way. There is more between us than just duty, Evan. I feel it too." Evan's heart quickened as her words sank in. He wasn't alone in this. Whatever connection had formed between them wasn't just the result of the ritual, it was real, something deeper than either of them had anticipated. "So where does that leave us?" Evan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Katera stepped closer, her towering form still graceful and powerful, but now there was a gentleness to her movements, a warmth that radiated from her. She looked down at him, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light of the chamber. "It leaves us with a choice. We have fulfilled our duty to our people, but the bond between us is more than just necessity. We can choose to embrace it, to see where it leads. Or we can choose to let it fade, to let our connection serve its purpose and nothing more." Evan felt the weight of her words, the gravity of the decision before them. He had never expected this mission to become so personal, so intimate. He had come aboard the Phyrexian ship to ensure humanity's survival, to secure the resources Earth so desperately needed. But now, standing before Katera, feeling the bond between them, he realized that the future wasn't just about resources or alliances. It was about connection between two people, between two species. "I don't want to let it fade," Evan said quietly, his voice filled with conviction. "This bond, whatever it is, I want to see where it goes." Katera's lips curved into a soft, almost imperceptible smile. "Then we will explore it together, Evan. Our connection is new, but it is strong. Stronger than I anticipated. We will build something from it, something that can shape the future of both our worlds." Evan nodded, his heart steady now. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The alliance between humans and Phyrexians would be complex, fraught with challenges and uncertainties. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. He wasn't facing the future alone, he had Katera by his side, and together they would navigate the unknown. As they stood together in the chamber of Genesis, surrounded by the gentle hum of the ship, Evan felt a sense of peace settle over him. The future was uncertain, but it was filled with possibilities. He had forged a bond that transcended borders, that bridged the gap between two species, and now that bond would shape the future of both worlds. "We have much to do," Katera said, her voice carrying the weight of both responsibility and hope. "But we will do it together." Evan looked up at her, meeting her glowing blue eyes. Together. The days that followed were a whirlwind of negotiations and preparations. With the success of the Union, the Phyrexian Council agreed to provide Earth with the resources it needed: terraforming technology, bioengineering advancements, and access to the rich ecosystems of Dalchuan. The alliance was solidified, and soon, shipments of supplies began flowing to the colonies and to Earth itself. The human race had been given a second chance. Evan and Katera worked side by side, navigating the delicate politics of both their worlds. But beyond their diplomatic duties, their bond continued to grow. They spent more time together, learning from one another, sharing their cultures, their histories, their fears, and their hopes. The connection between them deepened, evolving into something neither of them had anticipated. It wasn't long before the other humans aboard the ship noticed the change. Whispers spread throughout the crew about the unusual bond between Captain Thorne and the Phyrexian emissary. Some were intrigued, others uncertain, but no one could deny the strength of the alliance that had formed. One evening, as they stood together on the viewing deck of the Vigilant Star, looking out at the stars, Evan turned to Katera, his heart full. "Do you think we've really changed the future?" Katera looked at him, her expression calm but filled with quiet confidence. "We have set it in motion, Evan. What comes next will be what we make of it." As the stars stretched out before them, vast and infinite, Evan knew that whatever the future held, he wasn't facing it alone. He had dared to take the leap, dared to form a connection with a being from another world, and now, together, they would shape the destiny of two species. This was the beginning of something new, something that would echo through the stars for generations to come.